Good morning. This morning's Plain Dollars and Cents webinar is about how to legally avoid sales and use tax on purchases of aircraft. And the use tax and the sales tax is California sales tax. Now, this is a Christmas tree, and this isn't on this presentation because it's almost Christmas season. It's because this is what motivates me to be in the tax business. I was about 13 years old. I came downstairs to the Christmas tree where we had the Christmas tree when I was a kid, and this is what I saw. What's missing from this picture? Just unmute yourself and tell me your guess.
Presents.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I saw. No presents, and I was the second oldest of 8 kids. So there's normally this big, huge stack of presents, and there was nothing there. The one thing you can't see in this picture, there was a whole bunch of little white envelopes hanging on the tree, and I thought, whoa, that is a really weird, what's all about this? So I walked over and I picked through one till I found one that had my name on it, and I pulled it open and it said, in a couple of weeks, you're going to receive your present, which is it was some kind of a Kodak camera, I think. And that's one of the things that I had asked for on my list. But it still was strange. Something wasn't right. I found out later that my dad was in a dispute with the IRS. What the IRS did was they went into my dad's Christmas saving account and took all the money out of the Christmas savings account, which is why there were no presents under that tree. And I think that was a gutless puke move because, come on, we were a family of 8 kids. There was 10 of us. Where were we going to go hide from the IRS? It wasn't going to happen. So that's my motivation to be in the tax business, just in case you wondered. Any questions at this point? All right. I'm going to start out with this fraud statute because it's important that you understand what it doesn't say. It says any purchase of a vehicle, vessel, or aircraft or registers it outside the state of California for the purpose of evading taxes due under this part shall be liable for a penalty of 50% of any tax determined to be due. It doesn't say anywhere California resident. So even if you're not a California resident, if you bring your airplane inside California at any time within the first 12 months after you take possession, and the state of California finds out about it, they can assess you the tax. Doesn't mean you're going to owe it, but you have to be prepared to file this, what's known as a combined state and local consumer use tax return. And that is what my company does. So I'm telling you this so that you're kind of wary of the way the tax Nazis in this state operate. There's some rules about residents versus non-resident, and it's kind of technical. If you're an out-of-state resident, like BJ, I think you said you were from North Carolina. If you go to your North Carolina tax guy and ask him if you're a resident of California, he's going to tell you no. For the purposes of your airplane, he doesn't know that California does not use a definition based on income tax to determine if you're a resident. They use a definition out of the DMV code. And you couldn't possibly know that, neither could he. Right there, the aircraft is purchased by a California resident as defined in section 516 of the California Vehicle Code. Or the aircraft was subject to property tax in California during the first 12 months of ownership. So BJ, if you flew your airplane into California and the property tax guys found you there, they can assess you property tax. They will proportion it. They'll ultimately proportion it between North Carolina and California. But because you paid that California property tax, you are considered taxable in California. Here's some more definitions. If the airplane is used or, and that's not a city in Oregon, that's the state, that's not a city in Oregon. OR might be the abbreviation for Oregon, but I capitalize OR to make it clear to you that any one of these 3 items are true, that you're subject to tax in California. Any questions at this point? If you need to know the specifics of what would qualify you as a resident of California, you can call us directly and I'll spend some time with you, and any of my sales tax people can spend some time with you and explain to you. And I've created several YouTube videos on how the state of California goes into that, the DMV code, and it's something that you really ought to make yourself very aware of. Additionally, if the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration discovers the owners or shareholders of an out-of-state company are California residents, the CDTFA can decide to apply the 12-month requirement. That'll become clearer in a second. The important thing for you to remember is the taxpayer is not the one who gets to decide whether he or she is an out-of-state resident. Are there any questions? Give me a thumbs up if everybody can hear me fine and this is going okay for you.
Sounds great. Augustus.
Augustus, turn your camera back on. I need to see your shining face.
I can hear you, Tom, but I'm actually doing something else as well. So I'll turn it on in a minute.
All right. Okay. So,
hey Tom, I do have a question.
Go ahead, Dan.
That I'm happy to defer till later, or if you're going to get to that or whatnot. But I specifically have a question about buying into a partnership where perhaps they have already avoided sales and use tax in the current LLC, but then there's a transaction, somebody leaves that and a new party enters in. Does that re-trigger some of this? One of those slides that you just had up talked about.
That's a great question. The thing that you need to understand is the tax is not on the airplane. In other words, because you avoided the tax and went through the exemption processes in January, if you sell part of it in June, that's a new transaction. There's a change in the title. That will trigger an exemption. And also, this is a fairly controversial question because it's fairly evenly split. There's an awful lot of attorneys who think that just because you buy the shares of an LLC, that's not a taxable event. And I contend that's a misreading of the law. If your aircraft is in an LLC and the LLC is an active ongoing business, is filing tax returns on income, and the airplane is merely one of the assets of the LLC, just like the computers or the desks or the telephones, then you can buy the company that has an asset, which is an airplane. But if the only thing in the LLC is the title to an aircraft, it is my opinion that you're using the form of an LLC or a corporation to illegally transfer title to tangible personal property. So it's at that point that I always warn people, don't believe it. And this is especially true in the vessel industry because all the brokers are advertising it's owned in an LLC, so you don't have to pay sales tax. I don't agree with it.
Thank you.
Does that help, Dan?
Yep.
Okay. So also, if you're an owner of an aircraft and you have a partner and you buy out the partner, that also is a taxable transaction. And the thing to remember is that when you have partners, you don't divide the use of the airplane by the partner. The test periods are always based on the 100% of the use of the airplane. Okay, does that help? Okay, so let me get back to what the courts have to say about legally avoiding sales tax. The Supreme Court of the United States proclaimed that every citizen of the United States has a right as well as an obligation to avoid taxes. Now, the way that I read that, you're a crappy citizen of the United States if you overpay your taxes, because that's what that says to me. I've cleared every word in that sentence, and the Supreme Court declared that you have an obligation to avoid taxes. It doesn't say evade, and there's a difference between avoid and evade. That decision was in 1934. I will bet you that there are very few politicians alive today who's ever read that. And if they've read that, They developed very, very quickly into the amnesia that comes with socialism. Just saying. The legal right of a taxpayer to decrease the amount of what otherwise would be his taxes or altogether avoid them by means which the law permits cannot be doubted. Federal appellate judge Learned Hand, which if any of you have ever been to law school, everybody knows who Attorney Learned Hand is. This is what he has to say. Over and over again, the courts have said that there is nothing sinister in so arranging affairs as to keep taxes as low as possible. Everyone does it, rich and poor alike, and all do right, for nobody owes any public duty to pay more than the law demands, regardless of what Joe Biden said when he was running with Obama about fair share. He's wrong. He's a liar. What is against the law is evading taxes. And I'm sure everyone on this call knows someone who has evaded taxes. These are the guys that register their airplane, California residents who register their airplane in Oregon. And every time they fly into California, they park it in a friend's hangar on a ranch so that they can't be found. You all heard of the stories like this. I hear about it every day. This is tax evasion. This is fraud. Don't let your friends do that. Friends don't let friends commit tax fraud. There are several types of exemptions in California, and we specialize in all of those. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about sales tax versus use tax, because a lot of people think use tax is property tax. Sales tax is imposed on the retailers for the privilege of selling tangible personal property. A sales tax transaction has a very narrow definition. If it's delivered inside California and it comes out of the inventory of a company that has a seller's permit, a California seller's permit, that is a sales tax transaction. All other transactions are use tax transactions. Person to person, company to company, all of that. Use tax is imposed upon the storage, use, and other consumption in the state of tangible personal property purchased from a retailer. The use tax, rather than the sales tax, applies to purchases shipped from an out-of-state point to California consumer. The obligation to pay use tax is on the buyer. That's you. If you purchase an aircraft from a California dealer while the aircraft is located inside California, the dealer owes the sales tax. However, the dealer can reimburse itself from you, as long as he does it at the time of the delivery. If you purchase an aircraft for use inside California from an out-of-state dealer, you are liable for a use tax and must file the tax return and pay the tax or support the claim for an exemption. The times when there's an out-of-state dealer that has a nexus in California, this example would be, you remember when Cessna had all these dealers all over inside of California, that gave the factory in Wichita nexus in California. So you got to be, there's an out-of-state division of the CDTFA that audits all aircraft manufacturers. In other words, California goes into their offices, into all their sales, and looks at whether they should pick up the tax on this or not. If you purchase an aircraft for use inside of California, and if you see the term MTE left in this title, just substitute the word aircraft. If you purchase an aircraft for use inside California from an individual, whether he or she is located inside California or not, you, the buyer, are liable for use tax and must file the tax return and pay the tax, or hire Aero Marine Tax Professionals and support a claim for an exemption. We're on our way to 1,800 of these right now. And if you want to be number 1,801, just call the office at 916-691-9192. Find out why people say, call Tom. We never lose. Many people, a lot of aircraft brokers will tell you to wait until the CDTFA sends you a bill. This is wrong. The state does not have to notify you. It is your obligation to file the tax return that is due in a timely manner. If you buy an airplane and you're a California resident, and let's say you registered it outside the state of California, which, as I told you earlier, is fraud, okay, you have to file a tax return. There's a 12-month period from the time that you buy it until the time the tax return is due. And that's not technically correct, but think of it in terms of 12 months, okay? You have to file the tax return. And because you don't, if you're an out-of-state resident and you didn't file that tax return, that's going to be considered by the state of California as prima facie proof that the only reason you registered outside the state of California was to evade taxes, even though you have no way of knowing that. There are 3 exemptions, and we won't have enough time today to go through all of those. So what I'm going to do is in January, starting in the 2nd week of January, the 3rd week of January, and the 4th week of January, is I'm going to go through each one of the possible ways of you can supporting a claim for exemption. We'll go for a very deep dive, and you can come on and ask any direct questions that you want to make sure that you've got understand how to do this. How's everybody doing? Is everybody doing okay? Thumbs up if you're doing okay. Tim? Good. What I will suggest to you is if you're a California resident, that you always require that the seller deliver the aircraft or the vessel to you outside the state of California. The rules about where to take delivery are as varied as each state laws apply to your specific type of purchase. Always seek professional guidance. Is anybody having a question about what I mean when I say always seek professional guidance? Give me a thumbs up if you'd like me to clarify that any farther. Dan, we are your professional guidance that I want you to seek. I just want to make, I'm completely transparent about this. My intention is for all of you to be able to hire us and never pay the Socialist Republic of California another dime in tax. Is that okay with all of you? I'm going to just briefly cover the exemptions. And in January, starting in the 2nd week of January, the 3rd week of January, and the 4th week of January, we're going to go into each one of these exemptions and go very, very, very deep dive for you. There's the principal use test, which requires you to take out-of-state possession and you prove that it never enters California at any time within the first 12 months. There's the commercial interstate flight hours test. And there's the common carrier. The principal use test, I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg here. That requires an out-of-state possession. And then there's use and storage requirements. And these use and storage requirements, they're modified with if the state of California agrees that you're a California resident or a non-California resident. If you're a California resident, you cannot bring it into California at any time within the first 12 months. The thing to remember is the burden of proof is always on the taxpayer. In fact, the little warning I will give all of you, treat the document collection stuff that we're going to give you and tell you to do as serious as, imagine that the district attorney comes into your house one night with a SWAT team and they've got you held down on the floor of your living room in front of your wife and children, and they're going to shoot you in the head if you can't prove where your aircraft was 24 hours a day in the first 12 months. I'm not telling you that's what they're going to do. I'm just telling you that you need to take it that serious, because we do. When you engage us, we are like bulldogs. We will make sure that you over support everything, because I don't want the state of California to get another dime of tax. There are some restrictions that apply to the principal use test that do not apply to the commercial interstate test, such as California ownership, the property taxes that I showed you earlier, okay? This is the exemption that we use for 99% of our aircraft, because technically you could have the airplane inside of California every night of a 6-month test period and still not owe the tax, because this test period is based on flight hours only. There are 3 things you must do, and they must be done in the following order. You must take possession out of state. You must meet the definition of first functional use prior to entering California the first time, and we'll go through that in January. And then you enter California. It's a 6-month test period, and the entire basis of that test period is based on flight hours, not on where it's located, just flight hours for business purposes on flights that cross state lines. Then there's the common carrier exemption, where the airplane is being used for Part 135. Typically, if I'm going to presume that all of you guys are going to buy your own airplane and you want to lease it to a charter company for them to use for Part 135, you just create a lease arrangement with the Part 135 carrier. They use your airplane, they control your airplane, and they provide transportation for persons or property for hire. This is the one exemption where you can take possession anywhere, but you must consider tax implications of other state, and you can take possession inside of California. But as you'll find out in January, I'll still advise you not to do that, because I have a way of using both a combination of the interstate commerce test and the charter test to get the test period done in 6 months instead of using the common carrier test, which is a 12-month test period. That'll save you about $5,000.
Hey,
The
Tom.
test periods,
Oh, sorry.
yes,
There's a question
okay.
From Augustus. If I buy an experimental aircraft, say a sling, and it takes me a year or plus to build, at what time does the clock start ticking towards the 12 months?
If you were to use it in common carrier,
As personal use, like if I just wanted to buy an aircraft.
so we're going back to the principal use test.
Principal
Yeah.
use test, exactly.
Okay. You're not going to be able to start the test period until it's actually an airplane. It's not considered an airplane until you can register it with the FAA. And usually that takes about a 40-hour fly off first. And remember that you have to take delivery where it's actually transferred title to you outside of California. I know the guys at Sling, and we've figured out a way to make all this work for you, so you don't have to pay any tax on your Sling purchase. Okay?
Okay. Okay.
The common carrier test is also a 12-month test. So the interstate commerce test is a 6-month test. The principal use test is a 12-month test. And the common carrier test is a 12-month test. Now, here I'm going to play a little testimonial for you from one of my current clients who just finished his exemption process. I hope you enjoy this.
This is my 7th aircraft that I just purchased. I originally was with a firm in Florida, was not terribly happy with the experience I had with them. I was fortunate enough to meet Tom and Aero Marine Tax Professionals. My name is Rick Capretta. I'm the president of Capretta Properties, Inc. I'm in the business of real estate development. The reason I got into private aviation was because of the flexibility I needed to visit sites across the Western United States in cities such as Phoenix, Albuquerque, Colorado, etc. And also just from a love of flying. So I've been a private pilot for 28 years. I flew right seat probably literally 20 years prior to getting my license. So with a business partner and early in my life with my neighbor. This is my 7th aircraft that I just purchased. I originally was with a firm in Florida, was not terribly happy with the experience I had with them. I was fortunate enough to meet Tom and Aero Marine Tax Professionals at a airplane convention approximately, I'd say about 10 or 12 years ago, and we've now done 3 transactions with your firm. I decided to hire Tom and Aero Marine because of Tom's extensive experience in California with the taxing authorities up in Sacramento. Also, I felt very comfortable with Tom's approach. And after the first transaction and their meticulous nature in tracking how to properly get the sales tax exemption, I subsequently used them on the second and third purchases. So the biggest difference between the prior firm I used in Florida and Aero Marine was the detailed attention that I got through the process. It gave me a much higher level of comfort that we were going to have a extensive documented package to submit, and made me more comfortable that we were going to have very few issues in getting our California sales tax exemption. So the first time I spoke to Tom, the sales call went great. Tom had a very straightforward, matter-of-fact approach to it, which aligns with how I think. Their agreement was simple and fair. We got going quickly, and it was a very painless experience. The transition from Tom to Julie and then Julie to Shay has been fantastic. Matter of fact, sometimes I feel Shay pushes me to make sure I get every detail down right, which I know in the end is going to be to my benefit. So I really didn't have an issue with that approach. But the meticulous nature from getting an agreement signed with Tom to working with Julie and the transition to the day-to-day person with Shay was continuous, very professional, and made the process easy. Well, when I got the letter from the state of California granting me the sales tax exemption, I was very happy, especially in 2020, where California has a reputation of being more difficult in granting these sales tax exemptions. And as we all know, California taxes are high, if not the highest in America. And obviously having this benefit to obtain a sales tax exemption on a multi-million-dollar aircraft is monetarily a significant event. So I was thrilled, very excited. I mean, I saved approximately $200,000 during this transaction. So I have grown a little more apprehensive about California's taxing authorities. There's a lot of residents moving out of California that have a finer eye on them. People that have expensive things like airplanes, they have a finer eye on them. I was more nervous this time than I was the previous 6 times, but I was a little concerned because of COVID. It took longer than the prior times, but that's because California got backed up. But when I did eventually find out, I was relieved and thrilled. That's why I hired you. So that made me very happy. And I've done this before with you. I found that on this round, my 7th round of doing this, that you asked for an even greater level of detail in backup documentation. I assume that's because the taxing authority of California is looking at this with a more meticulous eye. Once again, I had no problem doing that. My goal was to do everything possible so you could be successful and get me that tax exemption letter, which you did. I would highly recommend Aero and Marine Tax Professionals to anyone buying an airplane. Aero and Marine has as much experience as anyone for a California sales tax transaction. Highly recommend your firm.
So are there any questions at this point? Just unmute yourself and ask away. It's a small, very informal little group.
I have a question. This is Dan. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Outstanding. So if an aircraft is currently getting any exemption, is that exemption something that needs to be ongoingly approved? Is that a tax event or a tax season exemption and it's continually renewed?
I think the way I understood your question is, do you have to do it over and over and over again every year?
Correct.
The use tax exemptions are a one-time thing. Once it's done, it's forever, as long as you do nothing that changes anything about the title of the aircraft. Don't add a period, don't add a one, don't add a comma, because they'll see that as an opportunity to create another taxable transaction for you.
Okay, outstanding. And then the second kind of follow-on question is, does any type of a transaction trigger a reset of the three different exemptions you mentioned, but trigger a reset of those calendars or looking into the exemption? So I think you answered it with your first answer. Any type of paperwork, any type of documentation, adding a period to the title, adding resets that calendar for that exemption to qualify?
Well, from the state of California's viewpoint, yes, we're going to try real hard to kick their ass and tell them you can't do that, but don't put yourself in that position is what I'm really telling you.
Yep. Okay.
Tom, I got a question.
Go.
If you've already taken possession of the aircraft, can it be reset? Like, can you go back and find some way to try to avoid the sales tax and use tax?
Okay, the sound went away when you first started. You're already taken possession, and right after that it started.
Right.
So
You've already purchased the aircraft.
okay.
So is there a way to go back and restart, do it over?
Well, the answer to that is it depends upon what documentation, because a lot of times buyers think they've actually taken possession and they really haven't. And it really depends upon what the paperwork says. So if you have a specific question, Augustus, just call me at the phone number that's listed on the calendar there, on the frame there, and I'll go over that with you directly.
Okay, I got your number.
And by the way, Augustus, the call is free.
Note to self. I've taken that note. I got it.
All right. How about you, BJ? Did you get anything from this that was helpful for you?
Yes, I see this as guidance so I can ask my CPA pointed questions to try to get them in the right direction to get the right information here in North Carolina. I tried to find two people that I was referred to and they didn't return calls, or they were out of business, or I don't know what the deal was, but I didn't get a response. So I've been fairly frustrated.
What are you thinking about buying, BJ?
Well, I have an agreement and we're going to close on it mid to late January.
What are you thinking about buying? What kind of airplane?
Cessna 182.
What are you going to pay for it?
140.
What is the sales tax rate in North Carolina?
7.5.
Okay. So you need to multiply that 0.075 times the purchase price and decide how much effort you want to put against legally avoiding that tax. If it's something that you really want to do, send me an email. You have our email address, right?
Yes.
It's right there on the
Yes.
screen. Send me an email. I have a friend that used to be the head of the Department of Revenue for the Department of Florida, and he handles all the southeastern states for my clients. So I'll refer you to him. I'll get you the help you need.
Very good. Thank you.
How about you, Tim? Any questions?
Nope, it's been good.
All right, so
Hey, Tom, I
please
have
come
one
back
question.
in January. Dallas will send you our schedule. Go ahead, Dallas.
I have a question. So if you buy an aircraft for business use, but you don't have an entity, and then in parentheses, they put statutory employee, when I would register it personally, but still be able to avoid the tax using your strategies?
The good news is for using the business use exemption, The ownership entity has zero effect on whether you qualify for the exemption. You can choose whatever you want. You can have it in your own name. You can have it in an LLC. You have it in a corporation. And we'll try to cover that we'll do the interstate commerce test in the second week of January because that's the most prevalent one. And please come back with your questions about that. So the question I have for now, is there anybody else on this call?
Yeah, there's a bunch of people on this call. There is one more question.
Go ahead.
Are you talking about creating a new LLC as far as putting your aircraft or that was me, sorry. Going back. Apologies for arriving late, but did you address establishing an LLC or is that a whole different subject?
The most misunderstood thing about airplanes is that a lot of CPAs and attorneys have a knee-jerk reaction to owning an airplane, and they're going to tell you to put it in an LLC or a corporation. And they say that it's for liability purposes. And here's what you need to know. If you're flying your own airplane, putting an aircraft in an LLC that you are flying in the event of a disaster, in other words, it goes into a grammar school and kills 483 little crying little children, you're going to get sued as the pilot as well as the ownership entity. My advice to you is to take all of your personal assets and put them into a separate trust to separate your assets from the damage that you as an individual might create. I'm sure most of you are old enough to remember the Exxon Valdez. Do you remember that the captain of that ship was in court a lot testifying? That's because he was sued personally for all that too. And it's an absolute no-brainer question. I don't understand why more people don't figure that out on their own, but you know, it can happen. Now, Allison or Cheryl or Gina, if you have any questions, please turn on your cameras and let's ask me. If you can't turn on your cameras, at least type your questions in the chat box. I'd like to help you.
Yeah, Tom, the questions I was asking you were from them. They don't have cameras.
Okay. So all of you, please come back in January and hit our 3 deep dive question and answer periods based on single kinds of exemptions. When we do the principal use test, it'll cover boats and aircraft and vehicles because that's where they're more prevalently used. We plan on giving you a lot of information. We plan on having our technical difficulties resolved by then. So come on back and see if we can keep our word. You know, it's our intention to always deliver to you good information. So I would also appreciate it if you would tell other people that you know about our events. No one else will give you this kind of information. No one else will be available to you. No one else, if you remember Rick Capretta's complaint about the other firm that and I heard, I think it was someone said on here that they had people to reach, but they didn't answer the phone. When you're on our team, you have my cell number. You have my wife's cell number. You can call us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are the customer service champions of this industry. Does
Thanks,
anybody
Tom.
have any more comments that they want to make, questions they want to ask? Dallas, I think we're done for the day. Thank you all for attending. I will be over my hoarseness by the second week of January, I promise. And let's do this again.
Thank you, Tom.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.
All right, take care, guys.